Hoje a gente vai ter mais uma conversa 100% em inglês aqui no canal, do jeitinho que vocês gostam. Falando um pouquinho mais devagar, falando um pouquinho mais claro, para que mais pessoas tentem conseguir entender o que a gente tá falando aqui. Lembrando que tem as legendas disponíveis aqui no YouTube, você pode ativar as legendas em inglês se você precisar desse recurso. E vão aparecer aqui perguntas na tela ao longo da nossa conversa. As respostas vão estar no comentário fixado aqui desse vídeo, para você checar o quanto você entende aqui da nossa conversa. Nosso objetivo é fazer com que eles entendam, tá bom? Então a gente vai falar de forma clara. E eu tenho uma convidada de peso aqui. And I'll ask you to introduce yourself in English, please.
Okay. Hi. Well, my name is Aline Fay, my last name. I'm a professor here at PUC, Pontifical Catholic University of Rio Grande do Sul. Well, I've been a professor here for 13 years now,
Wow,
I think.
that's a long
Yeah, I've met Carina a long time ago.
Long time ago. She used to observe my classes. Yes. Yeah, she used to work at Cultura Inglesa.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was a teacher there, and she was, the observer.
Yeah, exactly. Also, I'm a researcher at the Brain Institute here. I've been working with psycholinguistics, which is a field of linguistics. Basically, we work with how language is processed in the brain. I would put this way in a nutshell. I think this would be a nice way of explaining psycholinguistics. And more specifically, I would say I work with neuropsycholinguistics because I really studied the brain because I want to understand the process and parts of the brain that are involved in language and also how this can actually help and improve students. I would say quality of life as well, because sometimes when you're learning a language and you're struggling, it can feel a little kind of sad or it's upsetting. So I think in this sense, I work with the emotional part too.
Oh, cool. And what first inspired you to study language and the brain?
I really believe that teachers are researchers. Like deep down, we are researchers because when we are in class, we are always observing things. We are observing students and how they learn and how we can implement an idea that we think it's going to help students improve their activities in class and outside of the classroom as well. I think the first time I wanted to study the brain was when I started my master's, and that was the main idea, because at the time I was working at a school here in Porto Alegre. They work with proficiency exams. It's like mandatory in the school. I realized that students, for example, I was teaching FCE, which was B2 level. They were super proficient, but it was weird at the time that although they would understand like 100% of the listening tasks, they weren't actually able to complete the activities from the test. I thought, okay, but something must be happening in their brain, because when I asked them to tell me what the listening was about, they would do it beautifully. But when it came to actually completing the task was a little different. And then I decided to understand and study a little bit more. And then I started studying working memory. So I decided to study a little bit of working memory and understand if working memory was actually a big part of understanding a listening task or something. Individual differences could actually enhance or maybe be a problem for these students when it comes to listening tasks. At that specific time, I started studying this part of, I would call it neuroscience or maybe cognitive neuroscience, I don't know. And then I decided to check whether those students that were with me, they had a huge working memory capacity or not. And then to actually check if they had a huge working memory capacity, if they would actually get 100% of the listening tasks. And that was the beginning of my studies. And then afterwards, I started studying dyslexia because then I wanted to understand these other parts. And I would say that was the beginning.
That was the beginning. That was a great beginning. And we've just shot a video about dyslexia and how do you say TDAH in English?
It's ADHD.
ADHD and ADHD, which is TDAH in English. But this video is in Portuguese, but if you want to watch it, we talk about language learning and these disorders. We don't like the word disorder,
Yeah, we don't.
but that's how we say it in English. I'll leave the link here in the card and also in the description box. Another question for you, Aline. Why do some people seem to learn languages more easily than others?
I would say that it would go with the things that I was explaining before, the individual differences. Because I think that when I started studying working memory and then I started studying individual differences, you can perceive that there are lots of different capacities that we have as human beings that can vary from person to person. Due to those differences, sometimes you, for example, can be a better learner of Russian than I would be, or maybe I would be a better learner of Spanish than you would be. It would all go through those individual differences ideas. But I would say that one thing that it's not really related to individual differences, like cognitively speaking, is that how you actually approach that language in the effort you actually put into the task, because this also varies from person to person. So for example, if you get two people, for example, and one of them is studying, 5 hours a day, a specific language and working super hard on that, and the other one is just, studying for 10 minutes every now and then, of course that the other person might excel at that task in comparison to the other one. So this is normal. So I think it's a lot of the effort that you actually put into the task that would actually change the outcome.
It's not only a linguistic capacity, ability, but also the fact that, well, I can focus more. I don't give up.
Resilience, right? Yeah, I think so. I would say so.
And do you think anyone can become bilingual?
According to what we see in researches, because the field of bilingualism that I work with, that I follow, I go basically with 3, maybe 4 researchers. One of them is Grosjean, the other one is Bialystok, Professor Judith Kroll. They all believe that a person that is a bilingual, for example, is a person who can actually not be 100% proficient in a language. They can actually use the language for many different reasons and purposes in their daily lives. So, for example, I'm going to think about someone in my family, right? My cousin works in a multinational company. He doesn't see himself as a bilingual, but I know he's bilingual because when he's working, he needs to be in a meeting with people from many different areas in many different countries, and they speak English. So he's bilingual. But for him, a bilingual person is someone who learned the language, for example, in another country from a very early age. So they have some misconceptions, I think. For us, linguists, we think this way, we think about this in a different way. I think that anyone could be bilingual as long as you would follow this author's idea that is like basically using the language in many different contexts and be understood, because you don't have to be 100% perfect. I mean, I'm talking to you here, but I'm not a native speaker, right? So we make mistakes. It's part of life. I make mistakes in Portuguese. That is my mother language, let alone in English, right? So,
and it's funny because it was a kind of a simple question, but as the more you study, the more you have to explain your ideas. I am exactly the same. So sometimes it seems like it's just a simple question. But wait, I have to define what is bilingualism here. That's funny because I saw myself in you. And you were talking about non-linguistic aspects of learning a language. So sometimes people think, oh my God, learning English is too difficult, but it's because the person cannot concentrate or the person gives up too early. When I think about learning a language, one of the things that always comes to my mind is emotions. So it's not just, learning a language, the grammar and the verbs. No, it's like, you have to expose yourself. You have to be strong because sometimes for some people, speaking in public in a language that you are not comfortable with yet is like a threat, right? And I have a chapter about it in my book. And I'm mentioning my book right now because Aline, she has helped me with some amazing bibliography references for the neuroscientific part of the book. And this book is called Inglês Fluente. E muitas das coisas que a gente está falando aqui, compilei nesse livro, que é uma mistura de Classic Studies in Second Language Acquisition, com estudos mais recentes about bilingualism and neuroscience. And the link is in the description box right now. Ele tá em pré-venda e você pode adquirir ele em primeira mão. E a Aline deixou eu fazer essa publicidade no meu próprio livro. Okay, let's switch back to English. Thank you, Aline. What surprises you the most about how the brain learns a language? A new language, not your mother tongue.
Okay. I would say that when I started studying dyslexia, I had to learn exactly how we learn our first language and second language because I was studying bilinguals. Well, first and foremost, when we study letras, right, languages, we basically, according to law, we are going to be able to teach up from 6th grade upwards. So we don't usually teach very young learners, right? But we do actually, right? But I think I had never stopped to think about literacy, right? And then when I stopped and had to study a little bit more so I could understand dyslexia, there were some things that were like a surprise for me. One of them, when I started studying the parts of the brain that we actually use at that time in my mind. But when we see the letters, we see with our eyes, right? And then I thought that all the parts that were related, like in the brain that were related to sight would be like here, or close to here because it's our eyes. But the part that is responsible for actually seeing things and giving access to understanding into like the semantics part or the when we listen to a sound, the phonological, phonetical part is the occipital lobe, which is here.
Oh, it's right.
Oh my God, it doesn't make sense. But then, of course, when you start studying, you understand how everything is connected and how the brain works in a network. It's not like separate areas. So this was quite intriguing at the time, right? And then also, I think I realized as a teacher then, not as a researcher, that this was a skill that I didn't have, and it was kind of sad because, we are teachers, we are teaching a language. For example, we are English teachers, so we teach a language. Sometimes we are not aware of how the brain actually works to do that. And it's a huge process, right? This was something that was kind of missing in the whole undergrad studies. I think it's changing because we've been talking a lot about neuroscience, not as much as maybe all teachers needed. But I remember it was a funny thing, at the time.
And you were talking about the undergrad course. Undergrad é graduação, só para lembrar aqui. E grad course é pós-graduação in English. So let's talk about undergrad course. When I started Letras, my English was very basic. And I felt that most people knew the language much better than I did. I knew that I had to do something to change the situation. And so I put a lot of effort into learning English fast. And I talk about this in my book too. I share all the journey with you in my book too. How do students come to the Letras course nowadays? And how do they feel? Do you think they still feel like me? Okay, I don't have much time, so I have to do my best to learn fast. Or they think, well, this course should teach me to learn the language too. I know it's a tricky question.
It is a tricky question.
Okay, if you want to.
But no, it's okay. I think it's a good question, and I think we should talk about that.
And I'm talking about it because sometimes I get messages on my Instagram like, I started the Letras course, but my English is not good. They don't teach me English, and they are, irritated because, well, how come I don't learn English in the languages course? Well, you talk about it.
Exactly. So, what I would say is that I would say it's kind of 50-50 because we have like 50% of the students that are great, and I would say they are B2, mostly B2 and C1 level, which is like advanced already. And it's great because for those students, I think they can actually pay attention to things that students that when they arrived, the English was not so good, were like struggling because they have to learn the language first so they can understand, for example, a specific subject that is related to, I don't know, syntax or semantics. That is very hard when you don't know the language, right? When you don't know English and you have to understand semantics or syntax. So I think it helps when they already know. But here at UKI more specifically, because it's where I work and it's the reality that I experience, I would say that the students that start the English course without knowing at least, I don't know, pre-intermediate level, I would say, for them is really hard. Because I'm going to give you the example of English 1, which is our first subject in English, like full English all the time. For those students, we can see that sometimes they expect, like their expectation is that the first class is going to be all in Portuguese, that we are going to explain how things work and so on. And when they start and they get me, because I'm usually the teacher, I usually start saying, guys, I'm going to speak English all the time. Of course, I'm going to speak slowly and, with time, it's not going to be so slowly, but for today, yes. And the idea here is that you learn how to teach, not learn the language. You'll end up by learning the language because it's part of the process. If, for example, if you're teaching how to use simple present, you are going to end up by studying simple present again, right?
Sure.
But it's not the same thing as like seeing the simple present for the first time, because then it can be a struggle. Because then imagine you have to explain the rules like third person singular, yes, as, whatever, all the rules that we have to know. If you don't know the rules. I think that it's pretty much 50-50, and it makes me feel really sad is that sometimes they end up by giving up, and then they study letras português because it's their mother language, but then they realize that letras português is not as easy as they thought because there's also linguistics, there's also literature. So I remember I had a professor here, and he used to say that it's not because it's your mother language that you know everything. And I always remember him because I graduated in letras português inglês, right? My major was double, and I had to teach Portuguese classes, and it was a challenge.
Yeah.
I remember I had to teach like coração subordinada, but I had to study really hard. So,
and it's your mother language.
and it's my mother language, so.
And you are here, you know, teaching letras students, but there are many teachers, many good teachers who have never studied letras, but they are curious about the language. They mastered the language very well. What would you say about the difference? Who's the best teacher? The teacher who has taken letras necessarily, or anybody can be a good teacher? What would you say about that?
Well, I think I'm going to answer this question in a very personal way, because I think I once were both teachers, the one with no experience whatsoever in terms of an undergrad course, and then afterwards a teacher with a lot of theoretical knowledge, right? Remember, we were discussing before we started recording about our paths. I started studying letras when I was 27, okay? But before that, I was a teacher. I started at Britânia, Cultura Inglesa, when I was 19. What I decided at the time that I couldn't be in a university like PUC, for example, was that I had to master the language somehow, right? So I started studying like crazy. And then I took all the proficiency exams I could at the time. And then at the time, I did a course that was called Delta. I think it's still on. It's still a thing, right?
And I've heard it's really hard.
It is really hard. And it helped me a lot, actually, when I started letras, right? And I think that I was a very good teacher at the time. But at some point, I realized that it was not enough. And I really think, and I've told him already, so if he sees this video here, he will remember, I had a very good boss at some point in my life, and he said that, I think you are really good. You are a really good teacher, but I think you should maybe go to one university and study letras, because I think you should study linguistics more deeply. Then I thought, yeah, I think you're right. And at the time I had enough money to pay for my studies and stuff. And then I started studying here at PUC. And then my world changed completely. As a teacher at the time, I had a great deal of knowledge of the English language, but not linguistics. I didn't know anything about phonetics and phonology, semantics, syntax. And when I started studying here, then I realized that the world was huge in terms of what I thought I knew and what I actually could achieve. So I think this is like the breaking point, I would say. And the good thing about being at a university, and this is something I tell my students, because sometimes they are already teachers when they start with us. Here, they will be able to get to know other professors. They might get a job offer because they are really good in class. And then somebody think, okay, this person would be great in my school. Then I say, okay, why don't you invite him or her for an interview? And they end up by having this networking thing that sometimes when you are at home alone teaching, sometimes you don't have. So I think this is the good part. But I think it's a tricky question in this sense, because I don't think I was a bad teacher at that time. Not at all, But I think that I became a more knowledgeable person afterwards when I started teaching.
Definitely, yeah. I couldn't agree more. My life has completely changed when I started studying letras, because we see everything in a different way. Really changes the way you see language learning, the way you see mistakes. All right, let's talk about AI.
Oh.
Artificial intelligence. Do you think AI will change the way we learn languages?
Oh, that's a tough question. I think so. I'm positive, actually. There is a difference between what students think they know and what they really know. And this is something I talk a lot with my students in class, because I have two kinds of students here. I have students from many other fields, for example, med students, people from engineering courses and many different things. And I have the language letras ones, right? And what I see is that sometimes they think that, oh, now I don't need to learn a language like super well, because I go to ChatGPT, for example, I put my text and then everything is ready and everything is fine. But the truth is, when you have to sit in front of someone and actually talk, or maybe discuss a business plan if you're from the business area, or if you have to discuss something with a researcher, it's way easier when you actually speak the language, right? I think that AI is here to help us. I would say that in the field that I work at the moment, I think it's great because sometimes when we write articles or something, we want to sound more native-like because unfortunately, the journals still appreciate this kind of papers, right? Things are changing, but not as fast as we wanted. And we see that sometimes the evaluations are super harsh and they can see if you're native or not. So it's kind of blurry, right? And I think that in this sense, AI can give us a hand because sometimes you explain what you want to say, a concept or something, and AI gives you a very nice sentence, of course, because the amount of text they are exposed to are way larger than ours, right?
Sure.
So they know exactly, okay, this word would fit best in this specific context. So I think in this way, it's going to help. I don't know, as a teacher, I think that this contact, even when I think about, because here I'm thinking about AI, but I'm thinking about online things. I think that when you have an online teacher, but the teacher is there teaching you, explaining things is different from just typing something, on your computer and everything is there ready for you. Learning a language is way more than that, like have a text ready for you. It's to actually understand the rule. Why are you using this? Why are you using that? And how you actually organize your text in a cohesive way so people understand what you want to say. I would say that yes, AI will definitely change the way we learn languages in everything, I would say. But I don't know if this would be another question, but I don't think it would replace.
Yeah, that would be my next question.
I don't think it would replace human beings, because I really believe that there is something that we excel in terms of when we compare ourselves to AI. I think we are way more creative. When you read a lot of AI text, you understand the way it writes. I think that we are more creative than that.
Yeah, and we have our cultural background.
Yeah.
So imagine talking to an AI about Chaves, Chapolin, soap operas you've watched. It's not the same. It's not the same.
Exactly.
It's just a machine.
Yeah.
But I do think it's nice for us to practice our speaking ability.
Definitely.
Self-production.
Yeah.
So when you're not nervous, you're not tense because you are talking to a machine and you're practicing your speaking skills, your muscles, your tongue, your lips. I think this is something that really has been changing the way we learn languages.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you need to talk to a human being for you to have interaction, which is another essential aspect of being fluent in a language. You have to be able to interact with another person, another human, right? Now, some quick questions for us to finish this conversation. And if you are enjoying this conversation, come on, subscribe to English in Brazil, leave a comment because we're talking about interaction. The best part about creating content for you is interacting with you. So interact with us through the comments. So what's your favorite word in English?
Oh God, that's difficult. My favorite word in English. I don't know if it's my favorite word, but it's a word that I think the first time I came across this word, I was like, what? Which is flabbergasted.
I love this one.
I think the first time I saw that word, I was like, what? So I think it's a nice word.
I think I learned this word in a Cultura Inglesa
I
book.
think so, because it was in a Cultura Inglesa book.
I think it was the title of a section, if I'm not mistaken.
It might have been. It might have been. and then I was like, what does it mean? And then of course, at that time, we didn't have internet access as we do today. Then I got a normal dictionary and tried to find out the meaning.
What does flabbergasted mean? Leave it in the comments down below. And what's your favorite book?
Well, I love thrillers. So I would say it's because I've read this book recently. So it's the one that is in my mind. It's called The Snowman. It's really good. Just so you understand why I think it's not that it's my favorite book, but it's a book that is still in me. I remember exactly where I was and what I was doing and at that specific time when I read the closure of the book. And then I was like, I can't believe it. So in this sense, this is my favorite book now. But I can think about lots of classics here, but no, I'm going to go with The Snowman.
Okay. British English or American English?
Can I say Brazilian English?
I knew you would answer that.
I have a Brazilian accent. I think it's hard to say something different. But I think as I've learned English, a huge part of it on my own before I started learning in an English course or something like that, I ended up by listening to a lot of American English. So I think that American English in this sense is easier, but I think British English is super cool.
And if you could give only one piece of advice to someone learning English today, what would it be?
Don't give up. because it's not easy. I think that learning languages as a whole, it's not easy, but you have to try and you have to be persistent. So that would be my advice. I used to be, and I still, because I think we never stop learning, right? I'm a forever learner, I would say, and I was very persistent when I started. And I'm sure that Carina was very persistent when she started too. So I think that when you have that in you, you'll succeed. That's what I think, but you have to be persistent.
E com isso a gente encerra esse vídeo. Let's switch back to Portuguese. Quanto você conseguiu entender desse vídeo de 0 a 10? Foi tranquilo de entender? Lembrando que você pode assistir de novo também, ativar as legendas, pode deixar perguntas aqui pra gente também, que eu vou adorar. Se quiser acompanhar aqui o trabalho da Aline, pelo Instagram da Letras, né?
Sim, a gente tem o Instagram da Letras, que é letras_inglês_PUC-RS.
E se você vier estudar aqui na PUC, você vai ser aluno da Aline, gente. Primeiro semestre, pelo que eu entendi.
Primeiro e vários outros, mas o primeiro sim, com certeza.
E ela, eu acho que é recordista de paraninfas, né? Os alunos gostam um pouco dela, assim, sabe? Mas espero que tenham gostado da conversa de hoje e a gente se vê no próximo vídeo. Bye, bye!